All right, let's talk about something you see every time you go to the grocery store, the organic section. It's this massive global movement, right? But what's really going on behind that label? We're about to dig in. So, here's the big question we're tackling. Is organic food actually better for us and for the planet? Or is it just a really expensive luxury that's built on a nice idea? We're going to look at the science, the money, and some of the really surprising twists in this whole back to nature thing.
First up, to even get into this debate, we have to understand the appeal. I mean, what is it about organic food that has people so convinced? What's the promise that gets us to open our wallets?
Okay, so at its core, the definition is pretty simple. Organic farming basically just means growing food without synthetic, man-made stuff. So no artificial pesticides, no chemical fertilizers. The whole goal is to work with nature, using things like crop rotation and, good old-fashioned manure.
And wow, has this idea taken off? Just look at Europe. The market for organic food has been growing by about 25% a year. I mean, that is huge. This isn't some small niche thing anymore. It is totally mainstream.
But the appeal, it's about more than just dodging chemicals, isn't it? For a lot of us, it's a feeling. This one journalist really nailed it when they said organic food feels closer to the source. There's this pull to connect with the earth, with Mother Nature. It just feels like the right choice, wholesome.
And that feeling leads us straight into our first big debate. People buy organic because they believe it's healthier. But what does the science have to say about that? Let's check out the claims versus the actual evidence.
So the main argument you hear is pretty simple. If you get rid of all the man-made chemicals, the food has to be safer. It has to be more nutritious. That makes perfect sense, right?
Well, here's where things get tricky. Major studies, like a big one from the UK's Food Standards Agency, have looked at all the evidence and they pretty much reject that claim. They found, and I'm quoting here, no noticeable effect on health between organic and conventional foods. Any tiny differences they found were just too small to matter.
And it turns out there are a bunch of other things that actually have a way bigger impact on how nutritious your food is. Like, how fresh is it? How did you cook it? What was the weather like when it was growing? Even the exact type of carrot you're eating can make more of a difference than whether or not it's organic.
Okay. So if the health argument is debatable, what about the environment? I mean, a natural approach has got to be better for the planet, doesn't it? Well, once again, it's a little more complicated than that.
You're basically looking at a giant trade-off. On the one hand, yes, organic methods like crop rotation are amazing for the soil. That's a huge plus. But, and this is a big but, organic farming is often way less efficient. You need more land and more workers to get less food. And on top of that, if your organic kale is being flown in from halfway around the world, the CO2 from that flight can wipe out a lot of the environmental benefits.
And that whole inefficiency thing, that brings us to a really, really tough question. Who can actually afford to farm this way? And who can afford to eat this way? This quote really puts it into perspective. For someone in a wealthy country, using more land might seem like a noble choice. But for a farmer in, say, rural Africa, where every single acre and every bit of food counts, it's a disaster. For many people in poorer countries, without modern, high-yield farming, they just wouldn't have enough to eat, period. And all of this leads us to our last and honestly most surprising point. The entire organic movement is built on one simple idea: natural is better. But what if that whole assumption is just plain wrong?
So first, let's talk about something called a natural poison. Think about it. Wild plants don't want to be eaten, so many of them evolved to produce their own toxins to protect themselves. It's just a survival mechanism. And this quote just flips the whole script. An expert pointed out that for the last 10,000 years, what we call agriculture has been the process of breeding plants to get rid of those dangerous natural traits. So the idea of going back to nature with our food, well, it isn't always the safe and healthy path we think it is.
So where does this all leave us? Look, the takeaway isn't that organic food is bad. It's just really complicated. Choosing to buy organic is a totally valid choice, usually based on your personal philosophy and, frankly, whether you can afford it. But it's not some magic bullet, not a one-size-fits-all solution for feeding the entire planet. Which brings us to our final question.
When you weigh that emotional pull against the science and the global realities we've talked about, is the organic movement truly a better way forward? Or is it a luxury that really only the wealthy can afford to even debate? Something to chew on.